I see a number of members of the media, some friends and others. So let me just go over sort of the process here, what's going to happen. We're going to hear from 6 speakers today. Arne Duncan, who's the founder of Chicago CRED, Damian Anderson, who is a participant in CRED's program. We're going to hear from Vaughn Bryant, who runs the Communities Partnering for Peace, which is a network of, I believe, 16 organizations in serving 28 neighborhoods. And then we're going to hear from Angela Hurlock, who runs one of those 16 organizations, Claretian Associates, which I believe is active in South Chicago. Then we're going to hear from Chad Mitchell, who is a participant in the READI program. And then we're going to hear from Eddie Bocanegra, who runs the READI program. And that'll be it. I've asked all of the speakers to be brief, keep it under 2 minutes if possible. We have a number of guests on the phone as well, some of our key allies and funders and researchers and some staff as well. Please, everybody stay on mute if you can. And then if you're a reporter, if you don't mind, let us know your name and the media affiliation in the chat, or you can email Bridget Hatch. Her email is on the press release. And then if you could, please, you write your questions in the chat and I'll call on you. And finally, we are being recorded. So I want everybody to know that, which if any of the media want to hear the recording later, just let us know and we'll email it to you. So with all of that, I think we can probably just get started. And let's start with you, Arne.
Thanks, Peter. And I'll be very brief and then turn it over to Damian Anderson, who's much more interesting to hear from than I am. Chicago, as everyone knows, has been dealing with multiple public health crises for a long time, whether it's a public health crisis of poverty, whether it's a public health crisis of systemic racism, public health crisis of gun violence, public health crisis of the trauma associated with gun violence. And then we add this year the pandemic. And it's just been an extraordinarily tough year for all of us. There's no easy way to put it. We started 2020. We had 3 years of violence reduction, double-digit reductions in 2017, 2018, 2019. We started 2020 with a really ambitious goal of trying to have a 20% reduction of violence for the year that would put us on a path to getting to the levels of violence of other big cities and having us not be the anomaly, not having us be not so much higher than everybody else. But sadly, as everybody knows, this year, we're up over 50% in fatal and in non-fatal shootings. And across the city, we've lost almost 800 lives, and over 3,000 wounded, and countless more traumatized and grieving because of that loss. And it's important to mention these statistics, but it's also really important to understand that these are individuals. These are not numbers. These are real people, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, brothers, cousins, whatever it might be. And the ripple effects of this level of violence are just absolutely devastating to our communities and to our city. We're also a diverse and a dynamic city. And what's true in some places is not true in others. The story is actually pretty nuanced, pretty complicated. Some neighborhoods that historically have been very high in violence have actually been able to beat the odds, have done better. In Rosen, for example, we've worked for the past 4 years. The numbers are much better than the city as a whole, with homicides down almost 20%. And although non-fatal shootings are up 20%, which is still too high, we have a lot of work still to do there, it's still significantly lower than the city increases this year. We should also recognize that gun violence here in Chicago is highly, highly concentrated. We know that 15 neighborhoods on the south and west sides produce between 70 and 80% of the violence, but it even gets more nuanced than that. Something like only 5 to 7% of the blocks, individual blocks on the south and west sides, account for fully a third to almost a half of all the shootings. And historically, those same locations year after year have been ones of just absolutely intense violence. And because of that fact, we pushed really hard with 2 strategies. One's called FLIP, which is focused on hotspots during the summer months for the last 3 years. When our men are working, the number of shooting incidents at those locations is literally almost zero. Let's remember that these are some of the most dangerous and active locations in the city in terms of violence. Another strategy, this is so important, is what we call non-aggression agreements, which we then try to move into peace treaties. Those non-aggression agreements between cliques help to reduce those rivalries. And our outreach workers and others have negotiated about a dozen of those agreements. And while they're never guarantees of peace in the neighborhood, they are very, very significant strategy in terms of reducing the shooting. We intend to try and put in place a lot more non-aggression agreements and peace treaties as we go into 2021. And you'll hear shortly about the phenomenal work done by our partners in this really difficult work, and READI and CP4P. We're really proud together of the way that the entire violence prevention community came together this year to ease some of the Black Latino tensions during the civil unrest following the murder of George Floyd. That was a time of just extraordinary tension in the city. Good people across neighborhoods, across communities, across organizations came together and did tremendous work in a real moment of crisis to stop that and not let something that was already bad go to an entirely different level. There's also new research about violence prevention from both Northwestern and the Crime Lab. It's preliminary, and we'll leave it to them to release it when they're ready, but it shows a really significant positive impact with the men we serve and the communities we serve. And it gives us reason for us to be tremendously hopeful about what we can do going forward. We all know here on this call that we're simply not reaching enough of the young men and young women at risk. We're not close to being at scale. In some neighborhoods, if we're lucky, we might be touching a third of the men who need services. In other neighborhoods, it's much lower than that, probably closer to 10%. We have to commit as a city to getting to scale if we want to see the kinds of reductions in violence we desperately need. Our goal going into 2021 is the same. We want to get Chicago to be on par with other cities like New York and LA. It doesn't make any sense for us to be wildly higher than them, to be the absolute anomaly. I always say it'd be great to get to 0 homicides. That may not be realistic, but we should not be 5 to 6 times more violent than New York and 3 to 4 times more violent than LA. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Our communities, our families, our children deserve so much better than that. We were on good track over the past 3 years, making real progress, but this year absolutely set us back. And our collective goal is to make sure 2020 was an aberration and not a trend. An aberration and not a trend. We're grateful that the public sector is starting to do more and step up and invest. We expect the total public investment in violence prevention to approach $60 million this year. 4 years ago, it was literally almost nothing, so that's real progress. But we also have to be very honest. With the criminal justice system consuming literally billions of dollars every single year for policing and prosecutions and prisons and incarcerations, not to mention the healthcare costs of treating gun violence victims, our priorities are still collectively way out of whack. Failure to address the issue of gun violence at the front end also has a real opportunity cost as businesses divest and people leave the city and leave the neighborhoods because they don't feel safe. So in the year ahead, we will absolutely continue to push the dialogue around reimagining public safety. We will explore how to shift resources from policing to community-based approaches. And we will absolutely work and commit to a return on investment for these programs. We also continue to engage directly with police on this issue because they too have been failed by the system. We ask them to do so many things for which they are not well equipped, like working with the homeless and with drug abuse. And their jobs, like ours, have been made much harder because of the COVID pandemic. Very tragically, the stress is showing up in terms of in the police department with higher rates of suicide, mental depression, and early retirement. This is a long overdue, difficult, but really important conversation. And above all, we're going to continue to highlight the people at the heart of this issue, the young men and women who some people see as the problem, but who we all are convinced they are really the solution to our problem in Chicago. Our young men in our communities are going to lead Chicago to a safer city. We have to walk with them, we have to learn from them, partner with them, and they will take us where we need to go. I'm going to stop there and introduce one of our CRED participants, Damien Anderson. I met Damien when he was not in the best of places, and just so proud of the progress he's making. Then we want to hear from our fantastic partners, Vaughn and Eddie. I'll stop there, and Damien, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You're good. You're good. You're good, Damien. Go right ahead.
Ed.
All right. Well, we're just speaking on how like how CRED and how the whole situation just changed for me.
Go ahead, Damien.
Yep. Say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Chicago, it's not. I'm just, be candid with it. It's not easy at all. Like, you can go off statistics, you can go off whatever you want to base your research on or whatever, but I'm like living it, like actually living it each and every day. So I know the struggle with what's going on. You know what I'm saying? I had my run-ins with police and everything since a young age. The street life, everything that come with it. And it's just like, the only way it's gonna change is if we change ourselves. And that's what CRED comes in at, and the other programs, not to take nothing away from them. But I just can only speak for CRED because that's what I'm involved with. But it's like, they helped me do a complete turnaround from where I was at. I didn't really have no hope with life, period. I had no direction, no sense of direction, no real ambition to want to, be something or make something of myself. And CRED kind of gave me like a base to start off, a platform, somewhere, something to, to cherish, to live for. You know what I'm saying? It's like, because you're gonna face problems each and every day. You got peer pressure, for one. You got the how can I put it? Us being men, you got the will to want to provide. So you place this pressure on yourself to get out there and to find a way to bring some type of income in the house or whatever the case may be. And that's where a lot of us go wrong at, because we misguided when it comes to that. We're not told to go get a job. And even when we told to go get a job, it's not as easy as 1, 2, 3. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of different things that factor into that. I'm speaking from experience. You get the same way with like how Mr. Duncan said, the systematic racism. Like, that carries over to, the social life, the everyday life, trying to, better yourself. We coming from a position that's lower than most other social classes. So it's like we gotta find a way to work through all the things that's working against us and find a way to make it out. And that's what these programs do for us. Like, they give you a base, they give you somebody to work with you to help you bring out what you do.
Hey, Damien, we're getting a lot of noise from you. So if you could just finish up, that would be great. We got a couple of other speakers going. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Just to touch base, just let you know, like, these programs, they authentic, they help people. You got to go in with the right mind state to want to change. I'm living proof that people can change. I didn't want to get out the streets, but now I'm making the change that I got to make to get out the streets. And it's not hard. It's never gonna be easy, but you just gotta want to do it just as much as you want to do like the stuff that we do in the streets every day. I mean to take no time from nobody. I'll just get caught up talking about everything. It ain't nothing you could just speak on and change the subject. I tend to get a little deep, so I apologize for that. But yeah, you just gotta have the will to want to do better. I done been through it all: jail, shot, everything. That still never took away from me wanting to be a better person, and that's what mattered the most.
Thank you very much, Damien. That was great. Appreciate it very much. Vaughn.
Go on mute. That'd be great. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Peter. And, thank you for joining us today. It's no secret we had a tough year, as Arne outlined. And a lot of the work he talked about is carried out by CP4P organizations, which is 16 groups, a coalition of 16 groups working in 28 neighborhoods, mostly on the south and west side and a few north side communities across the city. We're intervening on crime, trying to engage people most vulnerable to gun violence, trying to steer people towards opportunities that can put them on the path to live a dignified life. It's going to take, so much more and more work and more time to get this done. There's no way that we can address, the level of trauma that our communities have faced in the short run, given, the history of systemic oppression in our communities. We need partners. We need everybody to be a part of this fight. We've built a great, what we call infrastructure for peace in our communities, where we have street outreach organizations at the local level, building those relationships, providing case management services, hosting events in those communities. We have an infrastructure where we can provide free behavioral health services, job training, GED attainment. We need partners around housing and more job training, drug treatment, those sort of things. So though we have 16 organizations, there's plenty of other partner organizations out there that, we need to link with to coordinate our services better to serve the population that's most at risk. We need to reckon with America's history of racial injustice. And to be frank, it's going to be a long road if we try to program our way out of this without some sort of financial restitution for the trillions of dollars that, have been taken out of our communities and Black hands. And in a capitalistic society, economic injustice is really probably the number one root cause, I would say, because it leads to disparities in education attainment, inequities in healthcare, inequities in opportunity. We have a historic wealth gap that we deal with right now, which means that there's money going in fewer hands, which puts real decision-making power and leverage in fewer hands. The other area that I would say, we need to really reconcile is our relationship with the police. We need more officers like Deputy Chief Cato and Sergeant Jermaine Harris to embrace our work and to move us forward in a way that we're not going to arrest ourselves or imprison our way out of these problems, but really have a lot of our Black police officers, operate in a way where they can be pillars in our community and that we can rebuild trust in the police force, because it is an institution that's going to be a part of us, but we want to be a part of the change and the evolution of how we're policed in our communities. We've had a surge of, gun violence in the past, but we remain hopeful that we can move this forward in a great way. Our partners in our neighborhoods are literally putting their lives on the line to save lives every day. And we all have to put some skin in the game. We all pay a price for gun violence, and we can all win. We all stand to win when we conquer it together. One of our organizations that's with us is Clarice & Associates. I've had the pleasure of working with Angela Hurlock for over 10 years. She's a pillar in Chicago, one of our great leaders, doing great work in South Shore, South Chicago, and South Deering. And I'm going to turn it over to her to talk more specifically about the work they're doing at the local level and her relationship within the CP4P coalition. Angela?
Absolutely. Thank you, Vaughn. So as Vaughn said, we've been doing this work for a deal of time, over 10 years. And we've been working in the community through a lot of different leverages. So Community Partnering for Peace has been a godsend because it is a structured way that we can do this work. So the organization has been around for about 30 years. Clarice & Associates has done work in the community for 30 years. We service about 3,000 families a year on the Southeast side. And the three things that we do is we do housing, safety, and convening. We convene around critical issues like being a trauma-informed community. Around safety, we work both within the Communities Partnering for Peace program and the Safe Passages program. And for us, that has been our link into understanding violence and how it works on the street and at all ages. So we actually do Safe Passages for 5 schools, and we use both of those teams, both the Communities Partnering for Peace and the Safe Passages team together. Why? Because a lot of the violence that we're seeing is not just domestic, but interpersonal, people who know each other. It can stem throughout the community and leak into other communities. What we have understood is that it's important to make sure that our team is well trained. And I think that is one of the most critical things that being part of CP4P has helped us with, giving our team legitimate training that is consistent throughout the city. So we have 16 teams, and whether you go to Austin, Inglewood, South Chicago, South Deering, wherever you go, they understand the tenements of how we're working on creating peaceful environments. Before Clarice and Associates actually was a full-fledged part of the team, we begged to be part of the academy. And when I say begged, we were part of the academy for 3 rounds without being funded for the work, just because we knew how important it was to, again, have this systemized, trained force that was out on the street, working with community to be able to do reconciliation. And that is so important. The Metropolitan Peace Academy is so simply important in training the men and women, and I will say that, and women. Our team is 20% women, because the violence is not only affecting men, it's affecting our families. And there are just as many, I will say, there's a considerable percentage of women who are out there who have the ability to give back and turn that situation around. I think earlier, our brother Damien was saying, being part of what's considered the challenge leaves a lot of people feeling like, once they're in the community, they've done whatever has happened to them, they aren't worthy of being part of any kind of solution. In our country, a lot of times we throw people away for their worst situation, for their worst mistake. And there's no way to really climb up out of that without someone helping you and saying, hey, this is the way that you can do that. Now, we can have isolated incidents where we see people and they go on to do great things, and they've done it systematically, pulling up their bootstraps. Well, I would say there are no bootstraps. The bootstraps are when a hand lends out to you and says, I've been there, I understand what you're going through. When you have a credible messenger who can then turn around and say, this is how you climb back out of that hole that you seemingly think that you're in right now. And again, I think that CP4P has been that systematic way to do that, not only with the training of our outreach, but then with the networking of the organizations. As an executive director of an organization that does a variety of things, it's been critical for me to sit at the table and listen and be at the feet of others who've been doing this work for decades, although we've been doing it for a decade, for people who've been doing it decades, and understand how we can get more engrilled in the community. How do we set up programs that are going to stand the test of time and be able to bring people out of the situations they're in? A lot of it is about economics, as Vaughn has said. It's about getting a job, being able to provide for your family, being able to provide for your grandchildren, and the things that all of us want to do. But if you can't get a job, you don't have a safe place to stay, you can't walk the street, then what are you to do? And so those are the challenges that we still need assistance with, that we're still trying to wrap our hands around and grapple with as we try to help these men and women to create new lives for themselves, better lives for themselves, and better situations for themselves. And then lastly, I cannot speak enough about the different type of behavioral therapy that goes on in a very safe environment. The true fact is, Black and brown people, we don't necessarily think of therapy as something that we rush to. And so being able to create it in environments where it can be accepted, where people understand, and people don't feel like it's going to be yet another environment for them to be traumatized through, is very, very critical. I cannot speak enough about this program. I cannot speak enough about the supporters that we've had in order to be able to move to the next level of creating peace and resiliency in our neighborhoods. And it's all been because everyone is bringing their best selves to the table. And that's from our street outreach team to our counselors, our case managers, our funders, the Metropolitan Peace Academy, the heads of the organizations. All of us together can definitely make a dent in this. It's not either or. And also, as Vaughn mentioned about the police, we have historically had a great relationship with the police, and we understand what one entity does best and what another entity does best. And it's not an either or, it's an and. All of us together can definitely make a dent in what we're seeing in the violence. And I'm happy to say that we have experienced double digits dropped in violence since 2017 because we've been a part of this program in Southeast Chicago. So we're super excited, not only for South Chicago, where we definitely are, but then also for our teams that work in South Shore and also in South Deering, and just really being able to expand the ability for people to create more peaceful lives and more productive lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. All right, so we'll hear from Chad Mitchell, and then we'll hear from Eddie Bocanegra, and then we'll take some questions. I just want to repeat to the media, if you have any questions, you want to signal that in the chat, go ahead and do that now or shortly, and then I'll call on them. Go ahead, Chad. Chad, you're on mute. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
I got it now. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Good afternoon. My name is Chad Mitchell. I am here representing READI Chicago. I am a participant. Been there since the end of 2018. However, I went out on my own, and I had caught a very, very, very high blessing with getting in a union in construction. So I'm going to get into that in 1 second, but I just want to say first and foremost, this year Chicago has had almost 800 homicides. So that's like a lot of families that's not having their loved ones for the holidays, at the Christmas dinner table, things of that nature. So, what I'm saying? I'm very, very disappointed in the way that things are still happening in our city, the violence. I would have thought that by this time, when I was, back when I was in the streets, by this time that things would have calmed down, but it actually gotten worse. So we definitely need these programs. And a little backstory on my life. In 1992, I was 13 years old. I saw my father die right in front of me in our household. He died from a stroke because how we were raised back then, the neighborhood, the community, the poverty, everything was just too much on him. He couldn't deal with three young boys, 3 teenage boys that were out of control. And my mom was left with 3 boys on her own after he passed. 15 months later, I lost my brother that was a year older than me. He was actually 15 years old when he passed. He got shot and killed on 79th Street. Just walking down the street, somebody got out the car, shot him in the head. That was actually his second time getting shot, but at that time he didn't survive. And I have another older brother. He's been incarcerated since 1999. He's serving a life sentence. On that same street, a murder case was put on him. He's actually innocent. We're fighting for his life right now. We're trying to get his appeals and everything back in court for him, and things of that nature. So, we hoping for the best for him. But, that's just basically a little bit of what I've been through. And I also been to prison. I got locked up when I was 15 years old, and I did 20 years in prison. During the time I was in prison, I educated myself. I humbled myself. I read books, went to school, did everything I could to come out and do right, because I knew that if I kept on that path that I was on from back then, that my life would be over as soon as I get out. So what I did was I started working dead-end jobs, factories, cleanup, whatever I could find. I was going on the internet, finding jobs and landing these dead-end jobs that, through what do they call those places that help you find a job? Staffing agencies. I was getting jobs through staffing. They was paying $8 an hour, things of that nature. So I want to give credit to one of the guys from READI Chicago. He's on right now with us. He's a good friend of mine. I've been knowing him for over 25 plus years. His name is Richard Lovett. He introduced me to READI Chicago. And he told me, hey, look, man, you know, we have a program that will help you, that will educate you, that will give you the job skills, the communication skills, the computer skills, whatever you need, you know, the housing information, whatever you need to better yourself. You know what I'm saying? They have this where I'm at because he's an outreach worker. You know, so at that time he was. And you know, I listened and I said, you know, even though I was a little older than the normal guys that enter the program, I still related to everybody there. You know what I'm saying? And I got a chance to meet a lot of the young men, a lot of the young gang members. I was able to mentor a few of them, you know what I'm saying, and hear their stories, you know, and that was a great thing to me because I was around oppositions that I normally wasn't around when I was doing my thing, you know, GDs, vice lords, BDs, and we all seem to come together for one common cause, to do better in life, to be better. And READI Chicago does have a lot of resources and a lot of, and their staff are great as far as, you know, helping people, you know, focus, you know what I'm saying, and come to work on time, be ready, be prepared, because they're preparing you not only for what they're doing, but for the future also. And like I said, I am 2 weeks away from graduating my apprenticeship program. I'm in the union. I'm a union construction worker. So local too. So I'm 2 weeks away from graduating. So I got to pat myself on the back for that. I earned several certificates, licenses and everything since I've been there. And I've seen a whole bunch of change in me from back in 1995. But at the same token, I would like to say that even though these resources and these programs are out here, that's outstanding. Everything is good with that, but we need more help. You know, I am still struggling. You know, I'm not all the way there yet. You know, housing is an issue. You know, like I lucked up and got the job that I have, you know, which is a blessing, but I know a lot of the young men that's going through the programs aren't going to be as fortunate. So, you know, it needs to be more help with finding jobs and getting these guys into permanent jobs, not dead end jobs. You know, so you know, our city is going to constantly be in a you know, spiral, a spin cycle, because until we really get these resources that we need, you know, because guys getting out of prison with nowhere to go, they got to live with women who might not be the best fit for them, and they, you know, might wind up going back to prison for something they didn't do. So it's best to, you know, have these resources and get more funding behind, you know, guys, you know, who are at risk of, you know, being in the streets and getting incarcerated, things of that nature. So, you know, that's my opinion, and I'm gonna just leave it at that. I don't want to take up too much time, but I appreciate you all listening to me. And you know, Eddie from READI Chicago, he's a good guy. You know, Richard Lovett is a good guy. These guys, more people like them need to be, you know, have more help. That's what I think.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks very much. Go
No
ahead.
problem. Yeah.
Thank you, Chad. Peter,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
You know, one of the things that I just took away from Chad and from Damien too, is that progress is not linear. Like for the folks that we're serving, because of, as Vaughn pointed out, there is historical challenges around race and equity and lack of opportunity, that we are still trying to heal. We're still trying to recover. Some of our communities are still recovering during the civil rights looting that we had, riots here in Chicago, both in the South Side and the West Side of Chicago. And our communities are still grappling with that. And as Chad pointed out, and as Damien pointed out too, there's so many setbacks that often people who have experienced so much trauma encounter. When you've been away, into the correctional systems and the re-traumatization that takes place in that area as well. I want to give a huge shout out both to Chad and Damien for just being vulnerable and to really articulate, the challenges they face and they continue to encounter, even despite the fact of some of the success they might have had. So again, as you heard just a few minutes ago from Chad Mitchell, who shared his story about his personal impact of gun violence in the criminal justice system within his own family, we understand that every single time that somebody is shot or killed, the impact that it has on our community has a huge ripple effect. And tragically, Chad's story is not unique to those of the hundreds of men in READI Chicago, or those of the thousands of families that have been impacted by gun violence in Chicago this year alone, to which those on this call continue to support through CP4P, through their partnerships, through CRED and their partnerships, and through READI Chicago and our partnerships. You all know the numbers. After 3 years of double digits declines in gun violence after 2016, we saw double digits increases in gun violence. Not only in Chicago, but we saw it in major cities, as Arne pointed out, Philadelphia, Houston, New York, LA. Just a dramatic increase of shootings and homicides in these key cities. Cities that often we were borrowing some of their best approaches and infusing this in our own city as we continue to identify best practices as well. You heard them both reference the promising results that we're seeing today through Northwestern University with Anna Papacristo and the University of Chicago's Crime Lab with Rosanna Ander, who are doing some amazing work and pioneering in the space of what I believe there's been a huge gap of research around violence prevention efforts and best models. And so I really tip out my hat to them because of what we're learning because of these opportunities as well. And although the study of READI is not complete yet, it's mid-study outcomes at this point, but the outcomes that we're seeing right now are significant decreases in shootings and homicides with both victimization and arrest among READI participants. And that, my friends, is something worth highlighting, is something worth celebrating, because just a few months ago, when we were seeing some of our biggest pharmaceutical companies showing 60, 70% of reduction with the vaccine, we celebrated. And that was only with a certain percentage. And so I think about the percentage of impact that we're seeing with reduction of victimization and perpetration with our READI participants. It is something really worth celebrating. And I am eager when the completion of this program to be able to highlight that. And again, to shape not only the way that our city continues to address these issues, but other cities, as were pointed out, like LA and Detroit and so on. And simply put, this means at this point that our guys with READI Chicago are less likely to actually harm somebody, less likely to kill somebody, less likely to be arrested, less likely to be a burden into our community and taxpayers. That also means that we are able to retain a lot of the people that we're building capacity and talent with, right? So they could also be employed, such as you heard from Chad Mitchell just a moment ago. And READI, CP4P, and CRED are 3 years into this work. And we are challenging ourselves to do more and to do it better. We want to continue to serve more people, to go deeper in the communities that we're serving and other communities that need the services, and to build stronger partnerships. But we can't do it alone. And that's why you see a lot of coalitions under these umbrellas. And even then, we have several hundred people who are focusing on this work, and we still fall short. We fall short in terms of the impact that we could be having across our communities. In fact, in 2020, we learned how quickly and effectively a united public health response can be mobilized in the face of a global pandemic. Not only did we wrap up preventative measures, engaging in massive public education campaigns, witness strong state and local leadership around intervention, and receive regular data updates to hold ourselves accountable, but we also ramped up intensive care measures. Our governor ensured that there were enough ICU beds and ventilations for the most sick patients in our state of Illinois. To draw a parallel, I like to believe that I work with the violence prevention patients who are most likely to end up in the ICU and on ventilators. I would argue that READI Chicago has been an intentional investment in the most sick, most at-risk groups of our community in addressing pervasive violence. It is long past time for our local and state leadership to make the same investment in intensive care for these men and their families. And the groups that you see here today who have rolled up their sleeves, who have been in the trenches, both from frontline staff all the way to leadership, to continue to make a change in our communities. And we cannot downplay the cost in lives and on communities that unaddressed trauma and our collective struggles to contain gun violence actually has. So this holiday season, too many families are suffering from the loss of a loved one to gun violence. Too many children are without their fathers during what should be a peaceful and joyful season. But this is a season of hope as well. We know that our work is making a difference. As we look towards 2021, it is my deepest hope that we will apply greater urgency to preventing gun violence in communities that continue to be the hardest hit. We must be better, and we can save more lives with a greater investment in proven approaches. Every day does matter. Every relationship matters. Every life matters. And today you heard from Damien and you heard from Chad Mitchell as two prime examples of when you are willing and intentionally investing in people's development and understanding that progress is not linear and recognizing the trauma that they've had to endure, we could make an impact and we could make a difference in our communities. And this is a newer way in addressing public safety. So thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. That was really great summation of everything. So we have a couple of questions. I'm just going to push everybody to be tight with their answers so that we can get to all of them. The first one is Maxwell Evans. And Maxwell, you didn't type the question, so why don't you go off mute and just go ahead and tell us what the questions are. And if you could tell us if they're directed to anyone in particular, okay?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just seeing your private message right now. Maxwell Evans, Block Club Chicago. This is for CP4P or Ms. Hurlock. As Damien had mentioned, I've got two questions that are related, by the way. As Damien had mentioned, research doesn't always reflect individual experiences and vice versa. So how do your member organizations balance the need for immediate reduction to violence with the need for data-driven strategies for long-term success?
You want to take that, Vaughn? A little complicated, I understand.
Yeah, I couldn't tell whether he wanted it for Angela to answer that question. Given she does the service, you can take part of that, Angela.
Yeah, and if Angela wants to take that, that's fine.
Go ahead, Angela.
Okay. Thanks, Maxwell. So I think in talking about how do we address some of the immediate needs, for example, over the last 4 weeks, we've been working to make sure that people are fed and housed. And it's actually not since the pandemic started. We have consistent work around this, but we've been doing targeted work to make sure families' immediate needs are met. Because when your immediate needs are met, you feel a less pressure to go out there and meet them on your own. And so, what do I mean by immediate needs? We've been able to support families with up to $2,000 to help pay their rent. We've been able to help families with buying food up to $250 so that they can buy food. We provided up to 120 families every month with food supplies, just honest food, come pick up a box of food and those types of things. And that's in addition to all the other services that we provide and getting out there on the street and making sure that people are connected to medical services and, job training and things like that.
So Maxwell, just to add to that, we're always in a mode where we're simultaneously doing the micro level work that Angela just mentioned and the macro level work, looking at the trends, looking at what type of infrastructure we need to have for the long haul. And we're also looking at, the history of our country and the type of interventions that we need, structurally and how do we address that as a coalition? One of the best parts about being a part of CP4P is that, you know, it's really the community-based organizations at the local level that drive all of the decisions we make. So understanding their perspective, working with Northwestern Neighborhood Network on the from a research perspective, so that we're always, you know, doing both, looking at trends and addressing immediate needs.
Go ahead, Maxwell. What's your second question? Let's keep it short, and then we'll try and get to some others.
Yeah, I was going to say my second question was basically answered, so we can just move on.
Okay. All right. So Patrick Smith from WBEZ asked the following, and Patrick, you can go off mute if you want to spell it out. But basically, what he wrote in the chat is that, did we see an increase in shootings with multiple victims this year? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes, but Rosanna Ander is on the phone and she can confirm that. And then secondly, are there specific efforts aimed at preventing those types of shootings? And I can at least speak for CRED, but I'd probably want to connect you with Jalen Arthur. We have done some social media stuff that was specifically aimed at discouraging, you know, what some of those mass shootings, shooting into crowds, things that used to be discouraged. I don't know, Arne, if you want to speak any more about that, and then Rosanna, maybe you could just jump in and confirm that the numbers.
Yeah, just quickly, two quick thoughts. One is Peter said that we've tried to, this is sort of a difficult concept maybe for folks to understand, but really trying to get into the culture, to ether some rules of engagement. And that's not shooting into crowds, not shooting when there are children around. And that doesn't make you a man, that makes you a coward. And we've used some rappers and rap videos to try and sort of get that message out there and, you know, start to try and change the culture. Secondly, the lethality of guns, the amount of clips, the rapid fire. We're seeing stuff that are just, you know, the only way to put it is they are war grade weapons. And
Yeah, so she getting all Newport smoke.
They
So.
belong on the you know, on any you know, street.
Bro, she getting out carton smoke.
Let's make sure we're on mute if we're not talking. So we were trying to do some things to change the culture. Big picture, we need to really try and get rid of the guns that are literally weapons of war. And because they are so powerful, because you can fire them so rapidly, unfortunately, it does lead to many more people getting shot and killed in a single incident.
Yeah. Rosanna, do you want to confirm real quick whether there were more multiple shootings? I think there were.
I was just texting Patrick. We had an earlier conversation, and I think we had looked it up when we were speaking to him, and it looked like there were, but I want to double check that and can get the information out to the group. But I think when we sort of looked at it about a week ago, it looked like there were, Patrick, but you were on the call. It was with Kim and Max. Do you remember when they were kind of pulling the real-time data, what they found?
I do remember them showing that it was up. I without getting too into that conversation, I wanted to just see if that was something that other groups had seen and had reacted to.
Hey, Patrick, can I jump in on this call too, on the question? So, you know, this kind of building on what Arne just mentioned just a moment ago. So I was talking to Superintendent Brown. We were in a panel maybe a couple of weeks ago. And so as of early December, I know CPD has taken out about 11,000, right? 11,000, not 1,100, 11,000 guns off our street in Chicago. And I asked myself two basic questions around that. I asked, why do people continue to feel that they have to carry a gun for safety purposes, right? Because that's what I keep hearing from a lot of guys. And the second reason, like, where do these guns continue to come from? And I still grapple with that. But I think also about, you know, less than a month ago, you know, there was a young man, Benny Trevino, who was shot around the Pullman area. He was shot with an assault rifle over 21 times. Him and a friend in the car as well. She was shot. And then I think about just recently also in the Austin community, we had a young participant shot multiple times. We had in North Lawndale just less than a month ago, somebody broke into somebody's house or in the morning, kicked the door down, you know, shot about 17, 18 times. And I think about just the kind of, you know, weapons or, you know, extended clips that they're actually using. And I just have to ask myself, like, how do we address that? you know, and that's, you know, and why so much anger and why the quick reactions behind this. And, you know, the amazing part about having a partnership with the Crime Lab is also that we know thus far that we have over 240 participants at READI Chicago who've been shot. And almost 40% of them have been shot in multiple occasions. Now, what that tells me as a program director, in terms of overseeing the initiative, I think about, if we already know that our participants who've been shot are more likely to get shot a second time, how are we getting ahead of that? And I think that because we have this rich data, we could pinpoint, even going a step further, to figure out how do we continue to intervene in the lives of these men. When I think about Chat, for example, Chat Mitchell, and he talked about some of the challenges coming home, I could tell you there's been a few guys that have come home that we know through READI have also been shot. As a matter of fact, we know, to dispel some, you know, a notion out there that, don't quote me on this number, but it sounds like, you know, about 180 people who've been shot and killed here in Chicago were either previously on parole or currently on parole. Now, don't quote me on that number. I can't think of the exact number, but it was something in that ballpark figure. And so when I think about 400 men that we serve in READI Chicago that are coming through the corrections with gun cases, right, or attempt murder or murder cases, again, I think about opportunities for us, right, for us collectively to think about, how do we continue to intervene? How do we think about the kind of doses that is needed? And at the end of the day, you know, what I would say is that we need more resources. We need more staffing around this, and we need more wraparound services, to Vaughn's earlier point. Like the challenge around housing, mental health, domestic violence, it's not just one issue or two. They constantly come with an array of needs.
Thank you, Eddie. So we have a question from Bill Cameron. And I'm not sure who should take it, but the question is this. Would universal basic income help alleviate the problem of the murder rate? And in thinking about an answer, I'm reminded of what Damien said, which is that, you know, we're men, and, you know, we need to support our families. We need to make a living. So I don't know, Vaughn, Arne, Eddie, I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in on whether universal basic income would be a good strategy, but we certainly believe that getting our men into the legal economy would help. Arne, you want to jump in, or Vaughn?
I'll start. Arne can come after me. So I would just say that I don't know that it would necessarily hurt. I just don't know that it's the answer. We live in a capitalistic society, and like I mentioned earlier, the wealth gap is ever increasing. There's far more money going into fewer and fewer hands. So even if you provide a universal basic income, the amount of leverage that gives you to advance your life is still minimal, given we are in a capitalistic society. So I wouldn't look at it as a panacea. We would have to have a basic level that makes people less vulnerable to doing illegal things. I think that would be helpful. But understanding the psyche of a country like ours, it's a lot easier to oppress people when you have a lot more money and the decisions that are being made are in fewer hands, and that, you know, that doesn't take away racism and white supremacy and some of the other challenges we have. So, you know, let's not look for a silver bullet. It's going to be a combination of multiple things that inputs it's going to take to make this go away. But I'm not saying that it's not one input that we could look at.
I don't know, Arne, you got anything to add to that, or?
First, to say amen. Anyone who says there's one answer here is actually part of the problem, not part of the solution. I know it complicates the narrative, but the narrative is extraordinarily complicated. Mm-hmm. So I do often say we're trying to solve not a crime problem, but an economic problem. And the lack of economic opportunity is a huge driver of violence. But it's much more complicated than that. So social media drives violence, the lack of crimes being solved, the very low clear rate here in Chicago drives violence. But I also want to say that we cannot do enough in terms of trying to help our men heal from trauma. And you could give a man a check for $2,000 or $20,000 or $200,000. If they are still dealing with extraordinary trauma, they are absolutely at risk to themselves and to the community. And we're doing as much as we can. And I promise you, we're not doing enough in that space. And we say all the time that hurt people, but heal people also help to heal others. And so we have to take, as Vaughn said perfectly, multifaceted approach, multidimensional. We have to do lots of things simultaneously. And the real honest answer is we're not doing any of these things at the kind of scale we need to be. And that's why we're struggling. And we just got to commit to go to scale on a multitude of interventions and supports and opportunities. And then Chicago could go to a very, very different place.
Yeah, in fact, I want to just add a thought to what Arne just pointed out, and Vaughn. You know, I think about, you know, through READI, we've been able to put over $9 million back into the pockets of our participants. That's $9 million that often, you know, when we tell our narrative, we don't do a good enough job to say about how are we also trying to help some of these families sustain themselves. And we recognize that it's really not enough. You know, working with us for 25 hours, maybe 25 hours a week, or sometimes even if they're able to get their stipend or their check, is still not enough when they are taking care of many cases, their families or the loved ones as well. Many of them have ongoing pending court cases and so on. But I want to go back to what Chad Mitchell pointed out earlier when he mentioned about he still continues to struggle. You know, it's not enough to just find people employment. It's not. There's some people in our communities that do need it. And it is opportunity and access, and they would strive. But there's a percentage of other people, the people that we are working with in this call, that just giving them a job is not enough. They need ongoing case management. They need opportunities to seek therapy, as Arne pointed out, right, to help process what they've gone through, to help process what Chad has gone through, seeing his dad pass away at a very young age, and then just 15 months later, seeing his brother being killed as well, and then having another brother incarcerated for life. You know, think about what it means for him right now that he's in this program. He feels the weight of his family, right, to pay for a lawyer to be able to fight this brother's case right now. And it often feels that we're like crabs stuck in a barrel where we're just, you know, one step forward takes 2 steps back all the time because of the systems and the conditions that many of our families find themselves in. And so it's really important that if we think about really challenging and shaping and really thinking about public safety in our communities, then to Arne's point, we have to go deeper. We have to really invest in this sector, and we have to do it the same way that we've done with COVID, the same way that we do with the police department, the same way that any Fortune 500 company would do, you know, when they're trying to increase a new product line as well.
Great, Eddie, thanks a lot. It's 12:58. We have one more quick question, and maybe Arne, you could answer it. It's from Steve Miller with WBBM. Sorry, Steve. And he's asked, why do you think Chicago has not been as successful as New York and LA at curtailing violence? Do their local governments spend more on programs like those represented here? Why don't you take that real quick, Arne, and then we're going to wrap up. So thank you, everybody, for being on the call. I'll summarize at the end. Go ahead, Arne.
It's a really good question, and one we continue to ask, and again, not one simple answer. So a couple things. I think historically, those cities have invested more in this violence prevention space. Again, if you look at the total police budgets, look at incarceration budgets, look at the violence prevention side, Chicago has been way out of whack there. Chicago is getting better. States doing more, cities doing more, counties doing more, but we need to continue to invest and try to scale. I was just keep coming back to that point, try and scale what works. Secondly, there's been much better coordination amongst different agencies, whether it's police and violence prevention in other cities. And very candidly, other cities have just been better at fighting crime. And I've said before that a big driver of violence here is retaliation. Retaliation happens, street justice happens when you don't get justice in the normal legal system. And the fact that there's so little trust between the police and the community actually drives the violence. It actually, violence begets violence. So more historical funding in other cities, although we are doing better here, still need to invest better coordination across different agencies in other places, and frankly, just better, more successful crime fighting, which stops or helps to reduce the retaliations here that are so devastating.
Thanks, Arne. Eddie, Vaughn, anything else? I think we've covered pretty much everything, but if anybody. All right, Angela, thank you so much. Chad, thank you so much. Damien, thank you as well. And thanks everybody for participating. Appreciate it. And if there's any follow-up questions, you know how to reach us. Please have a safe and healthy day. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you.